must also realize that the problems of racial injustice and economic injustice cannot be solved without a radical redistribution of political and economic power.
While there is a lower class, I am in it. While there is a criminal element, I am of it. And while there is a soul in prison, I am not free.
Hey there, I'm Jeremy Moeller, a writer and a meditation teacher based here in Washington, D.C., and you're listening to another episode of Meditation for the Masses, where I take meditation out of faraway monasteries, expensive retreat centers, and corporate America and bring it to the things that matter most to people who work for a living. That would be work, relationships, and politics. So basically, it's mindfulness for the hustle and the class struggle. This episode is about Thanksgiving, specifically how to lower the amount of stress you're going to feel or very likely feel when you're around your extended family for this holiday, if you're lucky enough to spend it with your family. The advice I'm going to give will no doubt surprise you. It's not the normal stuff of avoiding politics, avoiding Trump, avoiding religion. It's more about how you relate to yourself, not as much about how you relate to others, which I'll explain in a moment. I'd quickly like to say thank you for listening. Please rate this show on whatever app you're using. The first few weeks of a podcast's life are super important in terms of listens and ratings. As you may or may not know, Meditation for the Masses, I just launched it here in November. So these are the first few episodes. This is the 4th episode. And as always, stick around to the end for more about my writing and my meditation teaching. All right, let's get going. I'm going to start with a story. A few weeks back, my mom and I were driving to Baltimore Washington International Airport, also known as BWI, when we got locked into one of our typical bickering matches. We were headed to the Bay Area in California to visit my sister, so we were headed early in the morning to BWI. She kept repeating the name of the parking lot we were going to park in, and my dad was driving, and he was pretty much being quiet. Long-term lot B, she kept saying. Long-term lot B. 5 minutes later, long-term lot B, as if to remind us and remind my father if he forgot. And then yet again, long-term lot B. I hear you, I said, and I definitely said it with some bitterness. And internally, I felt like I was 16 years old again, only talking to my mom in these little short bursts of, I hear you, and I know, on my way out the door to see my friends or whatever I was up to at the time. But in the silence that followed, I noticed that my stomach and my shoulders were getting tense. That I had basically tensed up and then lashed out with the, I hear you. And I wasn't even looking for the long-term B lot sign at that point. I was basically lost in my head, feeling like this 16-year-old. And when I noticed that my body was tight, I started to loosen up a little bit. And I remembered that my mom had introduced the idea of the cross-country trip to see my sister. I realized that she had put a ton of thought and care into planning the trip. I bought my ticket, but she had set up the timing and budgeted out the trip and set up and booked the Airbnb for us when we were in Santa Cruz, where my sister lives. And so in her mind, parking in long-term lot B was probably a pretty important step. She sort of probably had a number of steps in her head on how the day was going to go and how we were going to get out to California. And all I had to do was get in the car, right, after buying my ticket. So after realizing all of this, I felt pretty bad, and I mustered the vulnerability to say, hey, I appreciate that you set all this up. And she didn't respond. I'm assuming she was still lost in her paranoia about missing the turn for the parking lot and just trying to make sure my dad was going to get to the parking lot so then we could get to the flight. And we continued into the early morning darkness. Eventually, we bickered again over our plans for once we were going to land in San Francisco, how we were going to get to Santa Cruz with the rental car, and if we were going to get coffee and where we were going to go. And it's just a normal script that me and my mom go through, especially if we're traveling or exploring somewhere new. The reason I tell this short, inconsequential story is to highlight that the most important ingredient for making the best of your time when you're spending time with family, particularly extended family, but especially your parents, is having compassion for yourself. And this might sound counterintuitive. Why should I care about myself? Why does it matter how I feel about myself? Shouldn't it matter how I behave and how I treat my family and my parents? Shouldn't I at least try to be nice to my family, even if I can't? Shouldn't that be the thing that I'm working on? These certainly are questions that come up for me when I think about compassion and how to grow up, essentially, and change my relationship with my family. And self-compassion isn't going to convince your uncle that his support for Trump is actually support for white supremacy. And it's not going to stop your grandma from judging you if you don't have kids, or if you don't go to church, or if you don't have a great, successful job in her eyes. But it will give you a little bit more freedom to choose how to show up in the moment, which is mindfulness, for lack of a better word. The ultimate benefit of meditation practice, and why I do it, and why hopefully you do it. And when it comes to family, this little bit of freedom, even just a split second for us to step back and choose, makes a huge difference. And this is because family, more than any other relationship that we have, has the tendency to trigger us back into parts of ourselves that are much smaller, narrower, and younger than who we've become and who we really are. So that morning in the car with my mom, I could have easily gone down the rabbit hole of blaming myself, which I've done so many times before, of turning my reaction to her into more evidence that I haven't really grown up, or that I'm a bad son, or that I'm just not where I'm at when it comes to, or where I should be when it comes to handling my emotions, or that I just haven't meditated enough in my life, stuff like that. But one thing I've learned about myself is that when I feel anger, when I feel an intense emotion, I usually try to escape it. Usually not by getting aggressive with whoever I feel like is causing me to feel that emotion, or whoever I'm angry at. I actually get aggressive with myself. And this aggression looks like self-blame, shame, a little bit of guilt in there too. It's a noxious mix that meditation teacher Tar Brock calls the trance of unworthiness. So I feel unworthy. This sense of unworthiness. But seeing that my reaction wasn't actually myself, and I'm putting that in air quotes here, but that it was just a part of me that was reacting, an old part of me that was reacting to my mother and was feeling annoyed in that moment. And this part may have served me in the past, when I was actually 16 years old and trying to set boundaries with my parents and establish myself as an adult, even though I quite wasn't there yet. I was able to have a little self-compassion in that moment in the car. And again, all it took was really a split second there. So what do I mean by this smaller, narrower, younger part, or these parts that come up? Again, I mean that 16-year-old version that, again, may have served me at some point. It's still in there. And when I feel stressed or afraid or angry or some other overwhelming emotion, I notice that it actually steps in just out of habit. And I've got other parts too. I've got something I call restless. I've got anger in there. We all have different ones, and we probably all call them different things. We tend to see them as all ourselves, but really they're just these parts. There's a whole theory actually called internal family systems that lays all of this out. There are a number of other theories as well that get into these different parts. I'm not going to go into that now. If you're interested, you can look up Dr. Richard Schwartz. He's the psychologist that first laid out internal family systems. But what I'm trying to get across is that these parts of ourselves, they pop up automatically. They're sort of on autopilot. And they're a big part of the autopilot that we're on when we're not being mindful. And they tend to jump in when we're feeling overwhelmed, and we can do little to stop them and make them go away. And what do family members, especially our parents, often make us feel? Overwhelmed. So I want you to see this Thanksgiving as an opportunity It's a chance to practice a little self-compassion whenever one of these younger, less wise parts of ourselves take over. And how you can do that is try to notice when you've pulled back into a role that feels younger and less wise. Pro tip, meditation helps us stay more present so that we can notice these moments. If you can muster the strength and vulnerability to do it, try to let go of the tendency to identify with that feeling, with that particular part. Just notice that it's a part, it's not self, it's not me, it's not I. And on the practical level, taking breaks can help. So try to breathe deeply, feel the sensations of your feet on the floor. It's always good to go into the body. You can try to go for a walk by yourself, maybe. Just say, hey, y'all, I need a break. Before dinner, I'm going to go for a little walk and I'll be back. Notice the sounds and the sights around you. Do whatever you can to break this pattern of these different parts coming up and start fresh again in the day. You might even be able to step away and do a little meditation, maybe in your old bedroom. And you might want to even try telling yourself internally that it's okay, or some other phrase that makes you feel some compassion for yourself, that makes you feel accepted. Sort of treating yourself like you would treat a close friend that made a mistake and maybe reacted. Lama Rod Owens, he's an amazing Buddhist meditation teacher from the Tibetan lineage, says this: okay, it's this profound way of saying, you know what? I'm accepting this because I have to, because it's happening. So my heart is full of pain. Okay. If I want to transform my heart, I have to start saying okay instead of avoiding it, saying this isn't happening. So, to summarize, self-compassion is going to get you where you want to go this Thanksgiving, to how you want to feel around your family. I'm telling you, vulnerability is what you want. That's what we're all looking for. Self-compassion is much more powerful than trying to be nice to everybody, avoid conflict, although avoiding conflict is useful if you feel as that's the safest route. And finally, meditation and the mindfulness it produces helps us notice in the moment when a younger, narrower, less wise part of ourselves takes over and acts out. And it gives us that little split second to start having some compassion for ourselves when this happens. All right. I'm going to let you get out of here. Enjoy your Thanksgiving, whether it's with family or not. And if you're not celebrating Thanksgiving, enjoy that too. I have a friend that calls it thanks-taking, based on America's colonialist history. Either way, enjoy and have a good day. A few things before you get on with your day. Make sure you're subscribed to Meditation for the Masses on iTunes or whatever app you use for podcasts. That's so you won't miss an episode. If you want more from me, sign up for my weekly email on meditation at jeremymoeller.blog/signup. My website also has free recordings of guided meditations and when and where I teach meditation in person. I generally teach in the Washington, D.C. area, but hope to expand my reach in the near future. And finally, please rate this episode on whatever app you use to listen to it. You might not realize how important that is. I spent years loving podcasts like The Tim Ferriss Show and The Dig without ever actually rating them, even though their host would ask me to rate them on every episode. Ratings make podcast apps recommend Meditation for the Masses to folks looking for podcasts on meditation. So it's really important to me. I deeply appreciate you listening. Thank you.